July 10th, 2020, infamous mobster Pat Musitano was gunned down beside his bulletproof SUV, marking the violent end of a criminal dynasty.
Witnesses report a hail of bullets as the attack unfolded.
But to understand why this happened, we must go back to where it all began.
It began with Rocco Perri. He emigrated from Calabria in southern Italy and eventually settled in Hamilton with his wife and partner, Bessie. When Prohibition came, they grabbed their opportunity. And by the mid-1920s, Rocco was king of the bootleggers. He and Bessie controlled an empire that stretched from Niagara all the way to North Bay. But when Bessie was murdered in 1930, Rocco lost power and eventually he vanished. Ontario fell under the control of the Magadino gang from Buffalo. One of the men who had worked for Rocco and then worked for the Magadino gang was Tony Papalia. His son Johnny soon became Hamilton's most powerful mob boss.
I started my career in 1990 with York Regional Police. Organized crime was already established in York Region when I got there. They had investigators assigned to different genres, and the evidence would be gathered through, oftentimes, through surveillance and wiretap investigations. We would also try and use some undercover operations and identify who the players are within these organized crime groups.
Born into a family linked to organized crime, Johnny Papalia had run-ins with the law from an early age. But he was groomed by the Magadino gang to take charge, and by the mid-1950s, his territory extended as far as Rocco Perri's had, all the way to North Bay. His businesses were gambling, extortion, and drug trafficking. He was known as the Enforcer, and his name commanded fear. Johnny commanded control. He demanded submission. If he wanted a piece of your business, he expected you to give it to him. And if you dared to resist him, you paid a terrible price.
When you look at the organized crime groups, there's a lot of secrecy that goes on with it, and there's a lot of loyalty. The way they deal with people that aren't loyal, it's death.
Papalia commanded respect and fear, and it seemed as though his reign would never end until the rise of the Musitano family. The Musitano family had roots in the small Calabrian village of Platti, the same birthplace as Rocco Perri. In the 70s and 80s, the Musitanos carried out a bombing campaign in Hamilton, extorting local businesses. The two young Musitano brothers, Pat and Angelo, were brash and violent. They built up huge gambling debts to Johnny Papalia. And rather than pay him, they decided to kill him.
The times where you'll see some diminishing of the power of some of these organized crime groups is when they kill each other off, whatever reasons that they have, and that's where you get the diminishing of power. They look after their own issues within some of the organized crime groups themselves.
In 1997, on May 31st, Johnny Papalia was shot in the head outside his business in Hamilton. The hit was carried out by Kenneth Murdoch, allegedly on orders from the Musitano brothers. He also killed Papalia's right-hand man, Carmen Barilaro. With those acts of betrayal, the Musitanos shattered the Papalia crime family and set the stage for even more violence. After Papalia's murder, anything seemed possible. The Musitanos were suspected of planning to wipe out the leadership of another Hamilton gang, the Lupino Violi group. It was a power play. Pat Musitano wanted to be Hamilton's kingpin.
The organized crime groups, they've got their ways of doing business, and it's not the cultural way that we are accepted of doing business. So they don't have to follow the same rules as we do within our judicial system. They have their own little system that they work with.
Retaliation was inevitable. It took a while, but in 2017, Angelo Musitano was gunned down outside his home. That hit is believed to have been ordered by mafia bosses in Buffalo as payback. The message was clear: no one is untouchable, and no brazen act of rebellion will go unpunished.
That person might be a liability, and or they're not useful. Oftentimes, because somebody's messed up, they will have to face their own punishments.
When Pat Musitano became the unquestioned head of the family in 2019, he immediately became the next target. In April that year, he was shot 4 times and taken to Sunnybrook Hospital. He survived that attempt on his life, but as one police detective said, he was living on borrowed time. On July 10th, 2020, Pat Musitano's past finally caught up with him. His murder wasn't just the end of a man. It was the end of a chain with links all the way back to Rocco and Bessie. But the power struggles, they're far from over.
From Rocco Perry's rise in the Prohibition era to Johnny Papalia's bloody reign, from the Musitano brothers' betrayal to their violent downfall, power has always come at a cost. And in this world of shadows and secrets, who will seize power next, and how far will the sins of the past reach?
Scene 7, take 3.
Stand by. Action.
How has the fight against organized crime changed over the years?